Hey, good day, all. Welcome to the Common Good Podcast. It's the 14th of December. Already. There's certain days of the year, Rob, where I feel like you can say already, and the 14th of December feels like one of those. Unless you've been having just a tragically long December, it seems like it got here awfully quickly. And for those of you who did, our condolences. But for some of the rest of us, boy, it's flying by. And on Tuesdays, that means that from here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and somewhere outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas, like Pagitt and Robb Ryerse, chat about politics and the common good and the role of faith in politics. And so that's what we're going to do today. Good to see you, Rob. Nice to be back with you.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Doug. You know what today is? December 14th. You know what it is? It is
Gail's
Election
birthday?
Day here in Arkansas.
It is. Well, happy
yeah,
Election Day. Why in the world would they have an election in December?
Yeah, so my state senator resigned and, decided that he was going to move on in the business world, and which came as a bit of a surprise because our state legislators just have it's just a part-time job, and they can have other jobs. But he resigned, which means that we are having a special election to fill that seat. And today is the day that we are voting in the primaries. And, it's one of those things that people, if you may or may not know this, but in the Republican primary to replace my my retired state senator is a guy named Jim Bob Duggar. And, you might recognize that name. He's the, I don't know, star of the right word? I don't know, of 19 Kids and Counting. And
a reality television show.
A reality television show about how his religious fundamentalism means that he's going to have many kids. You might also know him because one of those kids, his oldest child, his son Josh, was convicted of reception and possession of child pornography. That happened just last week on Thursday. And and so, there's this weird juxtaposition of Jim Bob Duggar signs all over town when just down the street his son is on trial for child pornography. And what the FBI agent who was investigating said was the worst example of child pornography he's ever seen.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I'm going to be going to the polls today to vote for someone that I think ought to be my state senator, someone I would be proud of to have as my state senator, a woman named Lisa Parks. I would actually, if you're out there listening or watching and you think, oh my goodness, Jim Bob Duggar should not be an elected official, completely agree with you. And I would encourage you to Google Lisa Parks and go donate to her because she's our...
Give it to the Parks Department.
Yes, we need Lisa Parks. So, so that's what I'll be doing today after we
she's going to be running as is this a partisan race, like a Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Green Partiers, Libertarians, and Berniers?
Well, I think Berniers are... might not be their own party, but besides that little caveat, so I will be voting in the Democratic primary today because I really want Lisa to be the nominee, which I fully expect her to be. And then it'll be interesting to see what happens on the Republican side. Everybody expects Jim Bob to be the nominee. There's actually 4 Republicans who are vying for the spot. They are all equally conservative and equally religious and equally it's a matter of
the Arkansas bona fides.
Yeah, but it's a matter of kind of tone and style. And it's going to be interesting to see what wins out. And if there's going to be some kind of backlash to Jim Bob, if people who are just watching the news here locally go, oh, I'm not going to vote for that guy. Or if his celebrity carries him through. So it's going to be an interesting day. Are your primaries
the kind that you'll know by I don't know,
Oh yeah,
8:03 p.m. tonight? Like this will be clear,
yeah,
or is it going to get all?
yeah. It should be. I mean,
There's,
it's the
there's no
only thing on the
runoff
ballot.
election, no multiple counts, no people don't vote for three or four people and ranking them or any of that.
No. Well, we could have a runoff if one of the
Mhm.
Republicans doesn't get 50%. And
Oh,
that would take
okay.
place 2 weeks from now. And then the general
Huh.
election is on February 8th. So we got a lot going on here, winter time in Arkansas.
Yeah, in the corner just outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas. Well, Chris Nichols, listening, is also from Arkansas. So howdy
Hmm.
ho, and Jim Eaton, you can see him in the chat. Telling us from Ventura, California. Jim, thanks for being a regular around here. Good to see you. Um, well, Rob, politics is, as you see from your examples there in Arkansas, it's just people. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? Like, it's easy to think to yourself that it's only a system, and it most certainly is a system, and it most certainly has its own inertia. It absolutely does its own thing and can carry itself along. But it's also just people who are doing these things and are saying yes or no to candidates, saying yes or no to running for office themselves, saying yes or no to votes once they're elected as a public official, and all the things that make people come mixing up into our politics, right? So the degree to which we are frustrated with our politics is the degree to which we are frustrated with just our own humanity and our little collective life together. I really like this TV show called Curb Your Enthusiasm, with Larry David, and he has this great bit in the last episode that we saw where he was getting involved in local politics just because he was trying to get out of some personal uh, quandary that he was in. He thought the city council person could help him, so he's kind of going door to door. And somebody said, what are you doing going door to door? And he said, I'm just trying to help people. And a friend said, you don't even like people. And Larry David says, well, I don't like individual people, but I like humanity. I like the I like the collective sense of it all. There's a lot of us who feel that way about
Mm.
people and politics. You just
Yes.
and the other way around. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on where you come down on this, the opinion of politicians, Congress or your state house or state representatives, is very low. People's
Hmm.
preference of their own representatives can tend to be very high.
Yep.
So, it's sort of the
Yep.
opposite of that. We don't like the collective, but we do sort
Yes.
of like our, and there's a lot that gets tied up in all this,
Yep.
as you
Yeah,
know.
it's I often kind of cite the statistics that vary a little bit depending on what's going on, but basically it's typically Congress has something anywhere from like a 9% to a 15% approval rating, and yet has an 91% reelection rate,
Yeah.
which is just it's just mind-boggling
People
sometimes.
know how to self-harm. There is no doubt
Yes.
about that. We all do things, and reelecting the same people over and over, uh, because again, you tend to like your own, you just don't like somebody else's
Yeah.
representative.
I'm not one of those that likes my own.
Hey, well, boy, that's a whole other thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm
Yes, it
I'm
is.
represented by people across the board who match my party, the party that I would identify with, but I tend to still have opinions about them even in the midst of their party affiliation, shared party
Mhm.
affiliation. Hey, Rob, we talk a lot about the role of religion, and we have spent a lot of energy at Vote Common
Yeah.
Good trying to get religious people, especially evangelicals and white Catholics, to pay attention to the common good as their voting criteria. One of the things that Republicans have done well is to entangle themselves with evangelical subculture
Mhm.
and increasingly conservative Catholic subculture.
Mhm.
Think Amy Coney Barrett and others, right? Who the Supreme Court justice. So there's this very conservative Catholic side, and then this evangelical side that is wrapped in with a Republican identity, partly by what we were just talking about, the fact that people who are evangelical or conservative Catholic are involved in Republican politics
Mhm.
very often. And we've spent a lot of time with candidates and with people trying to influence political circumstance in the United States, trying to help explain why do evangelicals and conservative Catholics vote for Republicans, because it seems that their policies and it seems that their behaviors and it seems that their tonality doesn't match their conviction. And it's because Republicans tend to put people who are from those communities into positions of prominence and leadership. So the best way you can share with a community, a subset of the United States population, that you hear them, listen to them, and you're on their side, is to have people from those communities be your representatives or your staff persons or your, the people that work inside your government or inside your campaign. The Biden campaign and the Biden administration has done this extremely well, not with religious evangelicals or religious people overall, but with a lot of the other groups that have often been left out of our politics. So they've taken special care, and I'm really glad that they have, to be sure that the kinds of people who are running departments, the kinds of people who are on staff, represent broadly, by who they are, the concerns of different constituencies. Right. So Joe Biden would mention that it's really significant that they have the first openly gay and married cabinet secretary, Pete Buttigieg. That's very important that they have a person from a tribal community that's running Indian affairs and relations and interior. Like these things matter, right?
Yep.
That the person that you're talking about and to is one of the people that represents the community. So this isn't unusual. It's smart politics, is what you do. But what evangelicals have done was what Republicans have done is ingratiated themselves with evangelicals overall. And that's one of the reasons that they know them so well. When you look at the Trump administration, and its grouping of cabinet secretaries, the thing it was screaming out to a subculture of anywhere from 50, 70, 80 million evangelicals was, these people are like you. These are people that talk like you. They go to your churches, you buy their books, they fund your organizations. This is the Betsy DeVosses and all the way down the Mike Pence kinds of people.
Ben Carson.
Ben Carson. Yeah, great. So what you're seeing is representation by personnel. Well, Mark Short is one of these people. Now, not to be confused with the satirical comedian Martin Short.
I'm not a big fan of.
Oh, really? Okay, I was going to say, who I happen to find funny, and I know a lot of other people don't, but I find him cute and clever. So not to be confused with that guy. Mark Short, who I am not a fan of, was the most recently was the chief of staff to Mike Pence, and he was also the policy director for the Trump administration as a whole. He had two different roles, came back, in and out, and played this role. If someone was to watch Sunday morning news programs on a regular basis, Mark Short, M-A-R-C, spells his name, Mark Short, was often on, the morning shows advocating for the policies of Trump. A white guy, middle-aged, bald, well-spoken kind of fella. He had a lot of influence on Mike Pence, in the degree to which Mike Pence had a lot of influence on the voters who were going to continue to vote for Donald Trump because they trusted him, because he trusted Mike Pence to be the vice president. And that had a lot to do with the support. Well, I want to do a little play-by-play breakdown of an interview that Mark Short did with David Axelrod. David Axelrod was a political campaign genius behind Barack Obama's life before his presidency and during and somewhat after. He runs an institute at the University of Chicago. He has a couple of podcasts, 3 or 4 podcasts. He's on more often than people at Vote Common Good, I think, running podcasts every week. So there's a lot. So he had Mark Short come to speak at this political institute that he runs at the University of Chicago, and there was a live interview in front of people. And I listened to it, and it was one of those times where I was driving and listening, and I was yelling out loud things. So got about 3 minutes here of Mark Short talking about a question. And Rob, I thought of you immediately when I heard this, because part of Mark Short's history is he describes his own pathway into politics.
Yeah.
And how it intertwines with his faith. But the connection to his politics and the big change and the big mentor in his life was Oliver North. I seem to recall you having some, I don't know, thoughts
I
about,
had
influenced by,
yeah.
fun for Oliver North?
Yeah, I had an autographed Oliver North 8x10 hanging on my wall when I was a teenager.
Okay, I thought that was true.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't wanna put the wrong,
yeah, right,
Republican, right-wing
yeah,
operative in your mind,
yeah,
but
yeah, right next to Newt Gingrich and Bob Dole and
the
Alphonse
Trinity. Oh,
D'Amato,
oh,
who you may or may not know. He was a senator
mhm,
from New
sure,
York, where I lived at the
sure.
time. Senator Pothole, they used to call him, because he would go fill up, fill potholes during election time. Um,
Smart. Smart. Well, okay, so Oliver North is known by
mhm.
you because he was part of, the Republican
Yeah.
1980s and early 90s crush fest.
Yes.
A lot of the rest of us know it because he was involved in international war crimes by helping to fund the the Nicaraguan uprisings,
Rebels. Hmm.
and lied to the president and lied to the American people, and I think was convicted. Is that right? Was he convicted
Yeah.
of the crimes that he committed, or
Yes.
was he more like a Trump person? Okay,
No. No. He
so
did.
he's a
He did time
criminal.
in prison.
Yeah, did time in jail.
Mhm.
And so Oliver North is complicated, but remains in the subset of right wing and Republican lore as a hero.
Mhm.
So Mark Short in this bit describes how he got into politics and was working for Ollie North. And he describes this. And the reason I thought it was interesting that in the David Axelrod interview, of all the things they could talk about, including where Mark Short was the chief of staff to Mike Pence while the insurrection was happening. That's where the
Mhm.
podcast ultimately goes, talk about what was happening on January 6th, which we'll be talking about. A little background then they do in this interview about Mark Short. And what I found interesting is he starts by sort of describing, as evangelicals and others might recognize, his testimony of how he got into Christian religion and the role that Christianity plays in his life now, his life in politics, and how he got into all this. And I found it to be this perfect little example of how you end up with a kind of religion that then can offer itself to politics and not do anyone any good.
Mhm.
So I want to sort of break this down with you after this. All right, producer Dan,
To be
if you're ready,
honest, when I came out of college, I was blessed, I think, to have some
this
really
is Mark
unique
Short.
opportunities. One is I worked for several years for Ollie North, and he taught me a lot. I think he was foundational to my faith. I think I had.
Yeah, I've seen you say that. Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I think that I probably had a certain perspective as to what a Christian is, and probably informed some of my college years. I probably didn't live up to the best behavior that you'd want to exhibit.
All right, we'll pass over that.
Yeah, thank you. We won't go into detail on that. But I was in my early 20s, and I certainly had this impression of what I know I did on Friday and Saturday night in our fraternity parties versus when I saw kids marching off to church on Sunday morning. And I was like, well, that's for them, but not for me. But when I worked for Ollie, I remember several times like barging into his office thinking I had something important to tell him. And I would see him in prayer, surrounded by other men, accountability group, in prayer with their arms around each other. And it was like, here's my image of a 3-time Purple Heart, Silver Star award winner from Vietnam, the macho Marine who I saw with other men in prayer groups. And it really began to change my viewpoint of what is a Christian. And I realized I need to evaluate that myself. Wow. And it started me on a journey to really better understand, I think, my calling, and started me on a different walk in my faith life and a walk to follow Christ. And I credit the sort of being around Ollie and seeing that.
Dan, can you pause this and then without going back to the beginning when we replay it?
Yeah, we're paused.
I don't know. Okay. Rob, I just want to note something here. You hear what Mark Short is saying. He's like, look, I grew up, I thought that a Christian was a certain kind of thing. And like the goody two shoes that like went to church on Sunday mornings and I was doing the party stuff. And so I thought Christians were like those kinds of people, right? That's his shtick. Then I get around Oliver North and I bust into his office, try to tell him something important. And there he is, this macho man, this war machine, a strong man, arm in arm with other men praying. Subtext, then I see that Christians are also warrior men. Right here. So what Mark is doing is subtly reinforcing this notion of the, as a friend of ours has written a book called Jesus and John Wayne narrative, that you could have this like macho, marine, strong, albeit going to be convicted criminal man who's also Christian. That being Christian is not, in Mark's mind, the goody two shoes people that are not going to, fraternity parties and doing bad things that we can't talk about now as an adult. Like, could you grow up a little bit about that? But what it is this group of men that are doing manly things, and that manly men are also Christians.
Yep.
So whatever's framing Mark Short's idea of what a Christian was and what a Christian can be, now it's turned into machoism. Felt like you were going to say something. Okay.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
All right. You want to say anything? Okay. So I just want to pause on that so you catch that. And he says, so it reshaped my Christianity. And then David Axelrod goes in again on this and basically says, so what does that have to do with how you do your thing now? And I thought this was interesting.
That really helped to inform my views.
And how does it inform your views? How does it inform your work in the public sphere?
Well, I think that as you know, obviously, I've been very privileged to work for Mike Pence, and I think that when I first worked for him on Capitol Hill, we had certain rules on the wall, and these rules were, to simple, have fun, to promote all House Republicans, but to honor God and to have a servant's heart. I think that's foundational to it. It's believing that we, in our public service, it's important to have a servant's heart, that we're here to serve the American people, more so than a personal ambition or a personal goal. And I think that if you develop a culture and a team around you that shares that viewpoint, it can help to keep your staff united. And we were talking a little bit with some of your students beforehand in questions about some of the current controversy between Biden and Harris and that relationship. And I think it's really important that if you share the same culture in an office, that you're there to serve a broader purpose, that you avoid some of the drama. And certainly our White House had a lot of drama.
Yes, I'd say so.
But I think the vice president's office really stayed out of a lot of that drama. And I think many people in that office followed Mike Pence's leadership of having a servant's heart as to why we were there and what our purpose was.
So, Doug, before we jump in and talk about the servant leadership and the servant's heart thing, I just want to make note of one thing that he said. When everyone in the office shares a culture, it reduces the tension and the drama. What he's saying is, like, we all need to be the same.
Yes.
That shared culture that he's describing is one of white evangelical Christianity and white Catholicism. If we bring in too many women, if we have any marginalized people, if we have any gay people, if we have any people of color, if we have any Muslims, if we have any atheists, well, that's just going to cause drama.
Yes.
So that's just a little thing that I noticed, which is a side point to, I think, where we're going to go.
No, I think that's precisely it. I think that's precisely it. And those of us who know the evangelical world well, we know that code language right there. Well, what we want to do is just keep out the drama and keep a servant's heart.
Yeah.
So okay. So that's evangelical speak for a whole culture that you're describing of similarity and assimilation. That's what's going on. Maybe you also heard him say that we had a set of rules on the wall, and literally they had a set of rules on the wall. It included to have fun. It included to represent and support all Republicans, to honor God, and to have a servant's heart. Okay, here's what I find interesting. You're going to claim your Christianity. You're going to claim that it is the driving force in what you do. And it comes up more times in the interview. So if you listen to the whole Axelrod podcast with him, you'll get more of this, especially when he starts talking about immigration. And then it's all about law and order. Like, sure, we want to be kind to immigrants, but first we have to be law abiding, right? So this kind of thing. So it's have fun, represent Republicans and support Republicans everywhere, honor God, and have a servant's heart. Some Christians would say that if you want to put something on the wall, the Sermon on the Mount's not a bad thing to put on the wall. Maybe a statement from Jesus to love one another should be on the wall. Maybe something like you should care for the least of these is what's driving you in public service. But no, here in this little world, it is enjoy yourself. I'm so blessed, so privileged, he said multiple times, just in 3 minutes. Support Republicans, in other words, build your tribe.
Yeah.
Honor
Yeah.
God. Don't talk about honoring people. Somehow your job here, first and foremost, is your behavior before God. And then have a servant's heart to care for each other and not put your own personal ambitions above your group, above what your group is accomplishing. And creating some sense of allegiance and servanthood toward one another. Now, there's a lot of evangelical churches that say almost precisely the same thing, right? We want to enjoy ourselves here. We want to build this church. We're going to honor God, and we're going to have a community of leadership, of servant leadership. None of that is the stuff that Jesus talks about, which is to give yourself sacrificially for others, to put others before yourself. He doesn't say Philippians 3, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Now, I don't want to pick on a guy for what he didn't say, because I've been the subject of many a podcast where people have said, listen to what this guy said, and they've, picked it apart. Most often, though, they weren't unfair. They were just talking about things I didn't care about. So I think that's fair enough. I think that's exactly what's happening here. And what Mark Short is exemplary of is this approach of Christianity that somehow can be all about strength and honor and groupness and honoring God, and nothing about people, nothing about the struggle, nothing about the least of these, nothing about protecting those who need protection. All the stuff Jesus talks about, none of it is in there. In fact, all those things he will say later when he references them, like Jesus's call to care for the refugee and so on, it's all subservient to these other things. So this is what's actually going on. So when people say that there's an evangelical worldview that frames this kind of Christianity, it's just vaguely Christian. It's like Christian infused, sort of, but like there's an essence of Christianity pumped into this thing. But that stuff and the idea that for Mark Short, the kind of Christianity he has in his mind is dutiful, don't be dramatic. Even when there's an insurrection, even when there's kids in cages, even when there's all this cruelty going on, your job is don't create drama and support your team.
Yeah.
Hardly prophetic, I would love you to say.
Yeah. So a couple of things. One, as you mentioned Jesus and the teachings of Jesus, can we not forget that Jesus also told us to love our enemies, which,
Bless those who persecute.
the always supporting Republicans and making sure Republicans win. I don't know if that squares necessarily with loving your enemies, but so I think that, I'm not sure quite, this is an idea that's forming for me. So I don't know if I've got like all of it figured out quite yet, but there's an interesting juxtaposition that happens with this kind of macho Christianity that Christian Dumais writes about so brilliantly in Jesus and John Wayne. And if folks that are listening have not read that book, it is a must read to understand, American Christianity and evangelicalism in particular. But there's a macho Christianity that has this this John Wayne approach of it's patriarchal, it's man-centered, it's militaristic, it's strong, and we're gonna fight, all of this stuff. But what's interesting is that it and maybe it's the velvet glove on the iron fist, it all gets couched in this phrase servant leadership or servant's heart. It's almost like And I'm thinking about like Promise Keepers, which was big in the in the 90s with Coach Bill McCartney from the University of Colorado, and it was calling men to this type of strong macho Christianity, but it was at the same time it was all couched in this serving, loving your wife, have servant leadership. And there's something about that phrase, that servant leadership or servant heart, which feels to me like it is justification to be a jerk.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's, well, it's almost like I don't matter. It doesn't matter what I do or how I harm people, because my intention is to be a servant leader. And and because I'm the leader, I know where we're supposed to go, and I'm going to take people that way. And my means of serving them is, doing for them what I think needs to be done. It's that, I don't know. And what happens is it becomes justification for harm. It's that thing that, sometimes people will say, maybe you've heard this phrase, like, well, the most loving thing I can do is tell the truth. And like, that is code for, I'm going to be a jerk to you and I'm going to call it love. And, like, I'm going to judge you, I'm going to hate you, I'm going to be a jerk to you, and I'm going to call it love. And, I think there's something similar here with this servant leadership, this servant heart thing, whereas I'm going to steamroll you. I'm going to do harm to you through policy and lawmaking, and I'm going to call it servant leadership. And it's just,
Yeah, well, what it does is it casts the focus then on your team or your group or your people.
Yes.
Like, it was interesting
Yes.
that what he said was, I was talking with some of your other students about what apparently is this conflict between the Biden team and the Harris team, and basically, well, they don't have servant leadership hearts, so they're not, the one, she's not falling into place to serve the way Mike Pence sort of said, my primary role. Again, that's a version of Christianity. This kind of like, we serve our team and we're the good guys, and then there's bad guys and you don't serve the bad guys. It's just not Christian. Like,
Nope.
Look, you can describe, you could even say, this is a great way to run a country. This is a great way to run a business. This is a good way to run a small group. I want to be part of a men's group or a men's and women's group or a non-binary group. And I want it to be all about honoring God. And I want it to all be about us building a culture in which people in this group, are all serving one another toward our common goal. Great. There's fine and dandy.
Don't call it Christian.
How you got to that from the teachings of Jesus, from the teachings of the church, from the Gospels, from the writings of the Christian faith, from the long Christian history, it's just not there. So in a lot of ways, and I know you and I have sort of been, both being working pastors at different times in our life in this role that we do, trying to reconcile the fact that the reason that there's a kind of Christianity that supports people like Donald Trump and this kind of new breed of republicanism is because there's actually such a limited amount of Christian ethos inside of that kind of evangelicalism, right? Like, it just misses it. It's just absent, but it's all couched in this way in language. So I just thought it was interesting that to the unfamiliar ear, they might hear Mark Short say this in that interview, and I bet there were just lots of people in their car just yelling like, oh, this guy's he's just a hypocrite. It's way more than being a hypocrite. It's the swapping of anything. Now, look, I don't know what Mark Short would say about Matthew 25, when you cared for the least of these, you cared for me, and this is what you ought to do, and you ought to love one another, and the teachings of Jesus from the Sermon on the Mount all the way through the crucifixion and resurrection, like all this stuff. I'm just saying, when he's asked what the role of his Christianity is in his public way, it is to honor God, build a team, support Republicans, and have fun. God bless you this Christmas, my man. I mean, you might want to put Christmas back, or Christ back in Christmas. You might want to consider putting a little bit of it in your Christianity too. A little Christ in your Christianity would go a long way. It just has nothing to do with what we should be referring. And I am loath to do this because I don't think anyone should go around telling anybody else that they're not Christian if they claim Christianity. thing about Christianity is it's open source. Everybody can claim it. Everybody can pick it. But I just want to point out that in the public sphere, when you as a public servant want to claim Christianity and that's the pitch, I think you've missed out on perhaps the whole essence of what the thing is really truly about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and this is, I think, an important distinction. We throw around the word hypocrite quite a bit. And, a hypocrite is someone who is acting in a way that is opposed to their values. And there's a kind of a self-knowledge to that. There's kind of an understanding of like, this isn't really what that's not what we have here. There is a self-delusion that like to this, that this is not a hypocritical thing. This is like, they see no problem with this. This is absolutely acceptable and absolutely the expression of what Christianity in America ought to be. And so, it's not hypocrisy; it's self-delusion.
Yeah, had Mark Short, and again, he's welcome on this podcast anytime. I'll send him an email and invite him just to let him know that we, had some commentary and we'd love to hear his input. Had he said, "Hey, when I was in college, I saw this group of Christians and they were all just being sort of goody two shoes and walking to church on Sunday," and I realized, hey, that kind of like moral avoidance, immoral avoidance Christianity, or this kind of like, be sure you get up early and carry your Bible and go to church. Well, I wasn't interested in that, but I saw a group of people working with the homeless, and I saw a group of people trying to stop nuclear war, and I saw a group of people trying to be sure that those who weren't loved and cared for. I saw a group of people working with addicts. I saw people who were helping, pregnant girls find their way in the world. And he said that, and that was what really motivated me. But what he said was, I swapped out my goody two shoes, avoid the world and don't be immoral Christianity for masculine, macho, real men. We're going to form a team and we're going to. There's another option, is what I'm suggesting.
That's right. And it might just be the way of Jesus.
And all the prayer for you and all the other followers, right? And that's what leads to the Proud Boys claiming Christianity as they've done with us. And it might be a story that if I stop talking here in a minute, we can get to all this other stuff that leads into this kind of Christianity that that a lot of us look at and just say to ourselves like, oh my goodness. So what I'm hoping people will do is not say Mark Short has Christianity right and Christianity is the problem. I'm not trying to be a Christian evangelist. I'm just saying that's a version of Christianity that I think is missing some of the essentials of the Christ in the Christianity bit, and spending a little more time around the ways and teachings of Jesus. And I don't want to go so far as to be like, Jesus was just a liberal. There's nothing about Jesus's context that's remotely politically aligning for today where we can just pick a side. Had you transported through some sort of, Back to the Future like moment and Jesus ends up now, I think it's pretty clear that this would be something that the one who you see in the Gospels saying the things that Jesus says in the Gospels would be saying a few things about this crowd right now. Like, I'm not sure the tough guy build a team and serve one another is really what this thing is about. Like, had he said, I think our job is to serve humanity and to benefit humanity and to create the human flourishing that God desires for all people, and that's what drives me to all this. Maybe you don't pick the former Marine killing machine as your guy because he now wrapped himself in the flag and arms of prayer and accountability. For sure. I got a few issues with all this. So
anyway. Oh, I'm totally with you. And I just say to Scott, who's listening in and says that we're delusional, just wait, because because if you think we're delusional on this, just wait until you hear our take on all this other stuff that's happening. But I think that there is a thread that is running through all of this Christian white nationalism that we see with the Proud Boys, we see with the events of January 6th, we see with the support of Trumpism, and like it remains a really significant problem. And and I think there's it needs to be responded to in all of these different ways.
And some of the advice that I have, I watched the Pete Buttigieg documentary. I don't know if you've watched that one yet on Amazon Prime. he makes the point, he's talking to a group of people, faith leaders at the time, so maybe he's pandering a bit, but he said, hey, one of the things I want to do is give articulation to the religious left in this country. I think about AOC coming out and when the insurrection was happening, she thought she was in physical harm's way and really in trouble. She dug deep into her faith, because when that crisis struck her, she went deep into her Christian faith and posted stuff about this, that what people like Mark Short and Mike Pence and a lot of the others do in articulating their version of Christianity as public service is then often matched by people with very deep faith that view the world differently, who don't say anything about it. So the answer to this, militaristic, arm in arm, new Christian army combat unit version is people describing the other kind of faith that they live, if they do. And I'm not saying we don't need more people doing Christian faith stuff in public service. We just need the people who do it to represent it enough to be a bit of an alternative for the people who are overly vocal in a kind of Christianity that just strikes me as untenable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So a little cleansing breath. Hey, you don't know, but yesterday, Dan and I started inserting little sounds in between the bits when we need a little break. So that's just a little magic stardust there to take us off to the next one. Let's talk about more pleasant things, like Liz Cheney taking deep Mark Meadows about the text messages around the January 6th insurrection. This is getting serious. Look, I know that the insurrection committee, the January 6th committee, doesn't have the full support of both sides of our congressional government. It's been basically relegated to a Democratic-led effort with a couple of Republicans sitting on it. Side note, both of whom voted for Donald Trump on November 3rd, just to be perfectly clear. And I'm not saying so that gives them more credibility. Really makes me wonder, 4 years and you still said yes to the guy? And then this, so it took this, still sits somewhere deep inside of me in a way that, but I think of Jesus teaching that the workers that work in the field for 1 hour or for 12 hours, they all get the same pay. So welcome aboard.
Yeah.
But really? You voted for the guy?
Yeah.
So Liz Cheney does.
So these text messages are just like the revelation of these text messages is just absolutely stunning. And now I just want to make this note. So this Mark Meadows originally stonewalled the January 6th commission and then agreed to cooperate and then changed his mind and decided not to cooperate and is today going to be held in contempt of Congress as a result of that. So during that very brief period of time that he was cooperating, he turned some stuff over to the committee. And just as a little bit of warning, I think I've got like a postal person coming to the door, which might mean, a lot of dogs barking. So just as a little warning there. So 'tis the season, right? So
do dogs only bark at certain times of the year there in our somewhere else?
The postal person coming to the door.
Yeah. Mine comes 6 days a week.
Yeah. So here's the thing. There's a lot of speculation.
Don't blame Hanukkah for your barking dogs. That's all I'm getting this time of the season.
Yeah. It's almost Festivus. So here's the thing. Mark Meadows turned over some stuff, and there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of thought that like the most damning stuff he has not turned over yet. That this is the stuff that was like, okay, this is acceptable. We'll turn this stuff over. So like the PowerPoint that I know you guys talked about yesterday and the, these text messages, if this is the stuff that is not bad,
yeah, right. If this is the stuff he felt like I can give this to the committee. Yeah. Okay. So what you're getting at, Mark Meadows, just let me background for people who don't know, because not everybody keeps up with this. Mark Meadows was the chief of staff for Donald Trump during the time of the insurrection. So what they want is the communications that Mark Meadows has that was going on January 6th, because Liz Cheney makes the point, we need to know, did Donald Trump act in a way by his actions or his intentional inactions to try to stop the certification of Joe Biden by Mike Pence, and thereby interfere with a congressional act, which the reason she states it the way she does when she does, I don't know if we'll show that part of the audio here, but in the same presentation she's doing, she says this, is because the statement that she uses, did Donald Trump do these things, is the wording in the statute of what it is to have violated the law. And so that's what they're setting up. So this isn't just like, hey, we just need to get a clearer picture and who was texting who. This is leading to very serious consequences of charges that could be brought against Trump or anyone else. So it's not like, hey, you guys are just digging around looking for too much. The point being, these are very specific things that somebody that text messages have been sent to the chief of staff of the president while the insurrection is going on.
So
These text messages leave no doubt the White House knew exactly what was happening here at the Capitol. Members of Congress, the press, and others wrote to Mark Meadows as the attack was underway. One text Mr. Meadows received said, quote, "We are under siege here at the Capitol." Another, quote, "They have breached the Capitol." In a third, Mark, "Protesters are literally storming the Capitol, breaking windows on doors, rushing in. Is Trump going to say something?" A fourth, "There's an armed standoff at the House chamber door." And another from someone inside the Capitol, "We are all helpless." Dozens of texts, including from Trump administration officials, urged immediate action by the president. Quote, "POTUS has to come out firmly and tell the protesters to dissipate. Someone is going to get killed." In another, Mark, "He needs to stop this now." A third, in all caps, "Tell them to go home." A fourth, and I quote, "POTUS needs to calm this shit down." Indeed, according to the records, multiple Fox News hosts knew the president needed to act immediately. Names. They texted Mr. Meadows, and he has turned over those texts. Quote, "Mark, the president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. This is hurting all of us. He is destroying his legacy," Laura Ingraham wrote. "Please get him on TV. Destroying everything you have accomplished," Brian Kilmeade texted. Quote, "Can he make a statement? Ask people to leave the Capitol," Sean Hannity urged. As the violence continued, one of the president's sons texted Mr. Meadows, quote, "He's got to condemn this shit ASAP. The Capitol Police tweet is not enough," Donald Trump Jr. texted. Meadows responded, quote, "I'm pushing it hard. I agree." Still, President Trump did not immediately act. Donald Trump Jr. texted again and again, urging action by the president. Quote, "We need an Oval Office address. He has to lead now. It has gone too far and gotten out of hand," end quote. But hours passed without necessary action by the president. These non-privileged texts are further evidence of President Trump's supreme dereliction of duty during those 187 minutes. And Mr. Meadows' testimony will bear on another key question before this committee.
It is.
Did Donald Trump, through action or inaction, corruptly seek to obstruct or impede Congress's official proceedings to count electoral votes. Mark Meadows' testimony is necessary to inform our legislative judgments. Yet he has refused to give any testimony at all, even regarding non-privileged topics. He is in contempt of Congress.
So, I mean, that little last bit, this other issue that's important to us, did he, through corrupt intent, seek to interfere? That is the article, that is the wording of the Sedition Act. So
action or inaction.
they're serious. 3 hours, as Tracy popped in the chat while she was listening to it. She even put the math together that it took hours for the kinds of resources to be deployed of what was going on. So I just want to say, one of my prayers on December 14th, 2021 is I never want Liz Cheney to be reading my texts out loud in an environment like that. Let me just say that's worst case scenario, right? Holy moly.
Can we also just take a minute to appreciate the fact that Don Jr. is texting Mark Meadows? Does that mean that Don Jr. did not have access directly to his dad?
Well, or it's a guy who over his, 40 plus years has learned, dad doesn't listen. I talked to dad. Now I need to run this to somebody who has some control because he has no control. Either way, either there's such a bad relationship that he doesn't have access, or he's realizing
coalition building.
I've shared this with him already. He's not doing anything. This is something they're going to want to know. They're going to ask that to Don Jr. because what they're trying to do is put into Donald Trump's head the knowledge that they're assuming he had, or that they're trying to find out, did he have the knowledge they're assuming he had? Can they get into his head and find this out? And that's that fundamentally, that's the question. Because one of the things all along that people have said is, well, how much did he really know? Because, back to Oliver North, what did you know and when did you know it was the thing that got Oliver North sent to prison before he became such a man of God. No, he did it as a man of God. Well, that's confusing. But anyway, the idea that Donald Trump knew and acted or knew and didn't act, that is key to all of this. So Mark Meadows was on Sean Hannity's TV show last night. Sean Hannity's guy run Fox, and he has a TV show. And Mark Meadows was on there, and he was talking about, why he's not going to the committee. And basically he's like, oh, because this committee is not legitimate government work. They're not doing legislative work. The only thing that the Congress is supposed to do is legislation, and they're clearly not. Here's Mark Meadows. All they're trying to do, my summation of is what he said, all they're trying to do is go after Donald Trump once again. Okay, here's a curious question. Why would you, being subpoenaed and answering questions, why would that reflect negatively on Donald Trump? If what the committee's trying to do is go after Donald Trump, why would you telling the truth about what you said, saw, and did, why would that reflect negatively on him? You would think you would be saying, Donald Trump had nothing to do with this. He did everything he possibly could. I'm going to get out there. If they want to ask me any question at all, I'll answer it because it's going to show that the president of the United States did exactly the right thing. Instead, he's like, oh, they're just trying to blame Donald Trump for something or catch him in something or trying to go after him. When your defense for not replying to a subpoena to Congress is, you're just trying to get my former boss in greater trouble, that probably means that something has gone wrong with what your former boss did. You don't get to plead the fifth on behalf of your boss. Like any testimony I would give you would be incriminating to my boss. That's not a thing you get to do. That's like the fifth plus amendment, and that doesn't exist.
Yeah, seriously. And Mark Meadows. Now, Mark Meadows, before he became chief of staff, served as a congressperson. These are people who are texting him are friends, are former colleagues, are people that he worked closely with. And I would just like to remind Mark Meadows, like, was it the work of Congress legislating and focusing in on that in 2015 when you introduced a resolution to remove John Boehner as Speaker of the House because he wasn't sufficiently conservative enough for you? Like, was were you wasting government resources and wasting everybody's time when you were doing that? Like trying to remove someone from office for no good reason at all? Like, come on. Like,
when Eric
we talked about
Holder,
hypocrisy earlier.
when
Come
Eric
on.
Holder and Hillary Clinton and others didn't respond to committee demands, requests, and subpoenas, these same people, who, including Mark Meadows, was saying, this is all about the institution of the Congress.
Right.
It has to be respected as one of the three federal branches with all the equal power.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what they said, doesn't matter what you think of the committee. None of that matters, whether it's the Benghazi committee or the Fast and Furious committee or any of this stuff. You as a citizen cannot make the decision not to. You can come and sit before our committee and say, I refuse to answer that question on these grounds, question by question, but you can't just refuse to show up or to turn over things. Like, you don't have that power just because you don't like it. That's the argument they were making for the last 30 years.
Yes. And I would remind people that in the Benghazi hearings, Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, showed up and answered every question and testified for 14 hours.
Yeah.
She ran out the clock on that ridiculousness.
Yeah.
Now, and she had the courage and the integrity to do that.
Now, I will say,
big masculine Christian Mark Meadows.
She took a long time to answer that subpoena. She took a long time to go there. They'd asked her. So look, there's some maneuvering that people in political powers and political situations do when this kind of thing is coming after them, right? For sure. Yeah. And if all this is Mark Meadows trying to stall this thing out until maybe, the Republicans have control of the House or something, fair enough. But you have to know that's what it is, right? What he is doing and what he is saying, this is all just running out the clock. So ultimately, maybe he's not going to be convicted and go to jail because he's finally going to go in and tell them what they want to know. But what's unbelievable was, to your point, how much is already in the public record about what was going on those days, and it's not going to bode well. Right. And this is, look, I wish we could talk politics around here and not have to talk about Donald Trump and not have to talk about the insurrection and not have to talk about the craziness. But it's still ongoing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I wanted so badly, 12 months ago for this all to be over and for it to be done and gone. But it's more like my hip surgery that I had 5 years ago, that the surgery itself to repair my hip was one thing. The recovery is still ongoing, right? Yeah. That's what's happened with something like Donald Trump, is the damage and the repair that happened at the election is done. But all the rest of this work, that all the therapy, all the healing that has to go on, that's still underway. And even worse, he's just destroying the other hip in this runaway analogy of mine. He's just damaging the other leg now by the Stop the Steal stuff that continues on and the QAnon kookiness.
Yeah. And speaking, I know we're just about out of time for today, but I feel like we can't go on without just speaking of kookiness, commenting on the latest candidate for United States Senate in Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz.
Dr. Oz. And as we were talking about it in our little chit chat beforehand about, what things we're going to talk about, and Dan would say, Dr. Oz, it was sounding to me like like DACA, like somehow he's describing DACA, because the notion that Dr. Oz, the TV vitamin salesman and a former, Oprah regular guest, doesn't feel to me like a political character. He feels to me like a television character. Well, that's familiar. And I don't want those to come together. And the thing about Dr. Oz, I think, is so curious is I think he lives in New Jersey.
Right. That's what I was going to say. He doesn't even live in Pennsylvania.
And I got to tell you, if that's an option, I hereby declare myself a candidate for Congress. And now I'll just start naming places. Because here's my question for you, Rob. Maybe you know this as a political guy. In the states where for federal office, you don't have to be a resident to run, which is some, This is a true thing.
Mm-hmm.
Most people just think, yeah, the people from that area probably won't vote for you if you're not from that area. But let's just say it's possible.
Yep.
Could someone like you or I run for multiple seats at the same
Mm-hmm.
time?
Yes.
Could we run
states
against?
Yes, some states allow that and some states don't. And some states you can run for multiple seats, and some states you can't. It just depends. In fact, in Kentucky, Rand Paul got the law changed because he wanted to run for re-election as a senator while he was running for president. And it wasn't just that he got the law changed, he actually got the Republican Party to decouple their presidential primary from their other primary so that he could be a Republican candidate for president and a Republican candidate for United States Senate, because there's just not a lot of integrity with these folks. So, I mean, this Dr. Oz thing, it's just, come on.
Well,
come on. Like, can we have...
Name recognition's high. Name recognition is
serious, thoughtful leadership instead of, as you call it, television vitamin salesman.
No, because there's a former football coach, and like, on the other hand, I like
Herschel Walker is running in Georgia. It's
I like citizen politics. I like it that just, average ordinary people, any one of us, doesn't matter what you've done before, you should be able to offer yourself into public service.
Yes,
I like that.
Agree.
I don't know what to do.
Yeah. So the two comments. I have worked a lot with regular ordinary people who are running for office. Ordinary, extraordinary Americans. Ordinary, extraordinary, ordinary Americans. And what I have met with them and helped them through this process. And, one of the things that I say often is that, like, listen, you're an expert in something, but it might not be politics. Like, you're an expert in education, you're an expert in medicine, you're an expert in whatever it might be. Might not be politics. And that's why, you need this kind of support. What we have on the Republican side of things is not an elevation of people who have an expertise in some other area and now are coming into politics. What we have instead is not an elevation of expertise. What we have is an elevation of celebrity. With Donald Trump, Herschel Walker, Dr. Oz, Caitlyn Jenner. We could go on and on and
Arnold
on
Schwarzenegger.
down. Arnold Schwarzenegger, yes. Going back to even Ronald Reagan. Like, we have got this on the Republican side of things, there's an anti-intellectualism that is baked in and is reinforced by the macho masculine Christianity that we've talked about. And that's a whole nother thing of coastal elites and, universities. Like, there's a whole thing we could talk about with the anti-intellectualism that brings about a distrust of science, as we see now. But one of the other things that it does is it distrusts experts, and therefore, instead of nominating experts to be leaders, what it does is it produces celebrity leadership, and at our peril. And Donald Trump and Dr. Oz and Herschel Walker and Tommy Tuberville and all of these folks are experts in things like football and marketing, television marketing, that don't translate into good governance. And like, that's a really scary proposition. If you've ever seen the film Idiocracy, which is a better concept than it is a film, it's a great concept. The film, maybe not so much on the execution, but it is like the natural ultimate end result of this kind of thing, that if we have Jim Bob Duggar having 20 kids and and controlling the population as a result of that, and we end up electing a professional wrestler as president, this is where we've
look, we should do a whole episode on this sometime, because I don't want us in our society to start deciding which areas of expertise we think are legitimate for citizen-led politics. I get nervous about that notion. I think there are some jobs that people have that, in my own view, should disqualify them from public service, like being an army general. Like, I think, no, when you've commanded people to kill other people, you shouldn't get to be the president. Like, you've forfeited by moral. But my opinion's obviously not all that well agreed to. So that's my opinion. So I'm going to vote for it. But I don't know that I like this idea that we're going to decide that some professions are legitimate for public service in the future and some are not. I don't know how we solve that, but I think that's a worthy conversation. Let's pick that up one of these weeks and talk about ourselves. Maybe get some people on to be.
Yeah. And I would ultimately just say, like, voters get to decide that.
That's for sure. And, when the voters in the Republican Party looked at all the choices of all the experts and all the people with great pedigrees in the 2015 and 2016 nomination process, they picked a reality star who had
failed businessman
with a history of behaviors that you would otherwise find unacceptable. But they said, and if we're going to be a democracy, that's what we get. And I don't like the idea that we say, well, too many stupid people are voting. I don't know, like all that stuff. Because I don't know who's then doing the picking. I don't know if we're going to decide smart people only, or we're going to have some version of an information test, or somebody has to have had some sort of job to be able to do a thing. I don't know. But then on the other hand, I'm like, I don't think Dr. Oz should be a senator. That just seems right. Like, that seems on its face to be ridiculous to me. And I don't think Donald Trump should have been president, and he proved why. So I don't know, but maybe that's just individuals. And, Sonny Bono I think he was a congressman, was he not?
Yeah. He was.
So, I got you, babe. All right. Hey, I got to go because you know what? On Tuesdays, I get to be be primary caregiver to Wesley Puck, and my time is past. So
I get to go
a 2-year-old. Hey, go vote.
I'm going to go vote.
Don't dig yourself into a hole with the Duggars. It's a Doug joke. Dougs can make all kinds of Doug and Duggar jokes. That's a free pass. Dan, thanks for the good work today. And friends, we will Dan, were you napping during this? Because you look like you were napping just now.
Put my head down just for a minute. No.
Put your sound machine headphones in and take a snoozer. Hey, thanks everybody. PJ, Tracy,
Trisha.
let me go back. Mike, Trisha, Lisa. Where's our delusional guy? Julie, Scott. Scott, thanks for listening. Roger,
Ryan.
Jan. All of you on the Jim, all of you on the chat, we really do
Chris.
appreciate your time. And sorry we didn't have a chance to talk with each one of you each time, or each one of your comments each time. And those of you who listen only on the podcast, share it with a friend or two and smash that like button. And I love it also when people tell people what to do. Like, I listen to podcasts where they're like, so I need you to do me this favor. You need to share this with 3 friends. Like, wow, that is
a bit aggressive.
We're not going to tell you. We're not going to tell you what to do. But if
but
you were
we'll
to share
invite
this with
you
3
in
friends and then tell us about it, we would like you more. We'd like you more than we do right now, and that seems almost impossible because we like you so much anyway. All right, is that it? Hey, tomorrow, Faith Day around here. So as George Michael said, tomorrow we will have a little faith.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I gotta go. You hear that? You hear a 2-year-old calling for me? I gotta go. Okay. Bye.
Bye, everybody.